All right, you guys, welcome back to another video. Today is embargo day on a new camera that Sony is releasing. So instead of releasing another video that I worked really hard on, and it probably wouldn't get any views because everyone's going to be watching the embargo on the new camera, and Sony didn't send me a new camera. I'm going to release this video today instead, and it's a fun little video. You guys saw the title, so without further ado, without getting into too much of it, here's 5 lenses that I wish that Sony would release, and they're kind of dream lenses. And I think if you're a Sony shooter, maybe 2 of these lenses are definitely on your radar. One of them should be on your radar, and 2 of them are just dream lenses that I wish Sony would make. So without getting too much into it, I'm Jamil. This is a boy named Jamil, and thank you guys for being here. So let's get into it. The first lens that I think Sony actually has to make, and I'm a little bit surprised that they haven't made it up until now, is a refresh on the 50mm 1.8. When I was thinking about this video, I thought that maybe they should make it a G lens, but I think that what Sony really needs to do is get themselves a really cheap, really affordable 50mm lens that's still good. The 50mm 1.8 right now is such a garbage lens. You guys have heard me talk about this so much. It's so loud when it focuses. It's so slow when it focuses. And it's important because, especially the sound, it's because you can hear it. You can hear if you have a mic on your camera. The mic is going to pick up the focusing motors on that lens. And it's going to be very loud, and it's going to show up in your videos. And when you're shooting, portraits with it, the final photo, when it hits, it's going to be pretty decent. But the focusing motors on that old lens is so slow that you are going to miss a lot of shots, especially when you think about how fast the G Masters are, especially when you think about how fast the 50mm 2.5G lens is. I think Sony really needs to come out with an affordable 50mm, somewhere around the $300 to $350 mark, that a lot of people can afford and a lot of people can go out and buy, and just refresh that old garbage ass 50mm 1.8. So that's lens number 1. Lens number 2, and this is a dream lens, and I know that maybe I'm the only one who's really thinking about this, but I want Sony to come out with a line of their own cine lenses. And the lens that I hope that they'll come out with first is a 35mm T2.1 cine lens. And ideally, it would have autofocusing features built into it. There are a lot of third-party cine lenses out there for Sony cameras, and all of them, I think the thing that you have to get right with cine lenses is you have to get focus breathing right. It's got to be perfect. There can't be focus breathing in a cine lens. You have to get the glass right. So if it's 35mm, if you guys look at the shelves here, like, it can't be any kind of warping or any kind of, things that you have to fix with lens correction. None of that. A 35mm has to be a 35mm that doesn't focus breathe. And then the last thing that you just have to get right is it just has to have that kind of cine look that you get from a cine lens. And I know that cine lenses can get really expensive. I know. I want them to. I want Sony to build a Sony branded cine lens for the FX30 or the FX6 or the FX9. I want them to build their own cine lenses that works perfectly with these cameras, and let us realize the potential of these cameras when we're not having to depend on focus breathing compensation, because what I'm filming on right now is a 50mm, but it's tighter than a regular 50mm frame would be because the focus breathing is on. So I'd really like to see Sony come out with a 35mm cine lens T2.2. And then if you guys don't know the difference between T-stops and f-stops, to overly simplify it, f-stops are theoretical, right? It's the focal length based on the diameter of, the iris. And so a T-stop is more scientific. There's a lot of other things that goes into it that gives you the right amount of light. So anyway, a T1.2 lens would probably have an f-stop of like 1 or 0.9 or something like that. And that becomes important because I would like to do a lot of filming at night. And so that's my second lens, 35 millimeter T1.2 cine lens by Sony with all of the bells and whistles. All right, so the third lens that I would like to see Sony make, they kind of already made, but not really. I'd like to see Sony make a 20 to 40 millimeter G lens, not a G Master, a G lens that has a like a power zoom on it, but I still want it to be like f2.8. I know Amaran has the 20 to 40, and I know that Sony has like Steak and Amaran or something like that. But again, like the 35 millimeter lens, the 35 millimeter cine lens, I want to see Sony build this lens for these cameras, this 20 to 40. I think it would be a crazy zoom range. That way people can still have the 20 millimeter to, vlog with, when they turn the camera around, because 20 millimeters seems to be the sweet spot for vlogging. And then you could, zoom out at 40 millimeters. Hopefully it's 2.8. I would love to see them make like a 2.0, but anyway, zoom out to 40 millimeters and still have close to a 50 millimeter, frame to take some photos with. I just think that this lens would give, shooters who shoot both video and photo the ability to have like one lens that they can do both with, vlog, make photos. You get the 35 millimeter in there, the 24 millimeter in there, and I just think it would be a really versatile lens that would give you all of the, it would help you realize all of the, things that you can do with your Sony camera. And it would have like a focus ring on it. That would be amazing. Would have a focus hold button, all of the things that make the Sony G lenses, so amazing. This is the 20 millimeter. So if there was a 20 to 40 about this size with a focus hold button, a switch that makes it click and not click when you change the aperture, that would be a dream. All right, so these last two lenses, I'm sure if you're a Sony if you're a Sony user, you guys have thought about these lenses a lot too. And before I get into it, I just want to ask you guys, if you're liking this video, if you like the content on this channel, give me a follow, give me a thumbs up. That would be great. But anyway, on to the next lens. And that lens is an 85 millimeter f1.2. Now, let's talk about the 85 millimeter. Here is my 85 millimeter G Master lens. And for a long time, this was my bread and butter. In fact, when Sigma came out with their 85 millimeter and everybody started to sing the praises of that, I was stubborn. I was saying, this is still a great lens, and it is. I always said about this lens is that when you use it, this lens, and probably it's the only lens out of all of the G Masters, this lens has a bit of character to it that in a couple of years, I believe that this is going to be one of the lenses that people come back to and talk about, just the look of it. And I just love this lens. The only problem though is one, it's really old. I think this was one of Sony's original G Masters. If I'm not mistaken, this was Sony's first G Master Prime. And so I'm thinking that this lens is probably about 6 years old, 7 years old at this point. And it focuses so slowly and it focuses so loud. In fact, it probably is the 85 millimeter version of that 50 millimeter that I was talking about. Now, I wouldn't go so far as to call it trash like the 50 millimeter, but it is an old lens, it's a slow lens, and I find myself not using it So Sony really needs to give us that 85mm f1.2, if only so we don't have to listen to the Canon users throwing it in our face that, you know, they have it and we don't. Sony, we need that 85mm. We need that 1.2. We need that sweet, sweet bokeh. Give it to us. 85mm, 1.2, and you can have all of my money. And then, the last lens on this list, you guys want it. I want it. We've been asking for it. It's kind of embarrassing that we don't have it already. And that is the 16-35 2.8 G Master version 2. Sony, where is this lens? I mean, we have now, today, I think they're going to release a second 70-200 already, an f4, and we're still waiting on the new 2.8 G Master. And here's what I want. The original 16-35 G Master, it was such a huge, heavy lens. In fact, it was one of the reasons that I sold it, is because it was so big and so heavy. And so what I'm hoping for is that Sony does the same thing with the 16-35 that they did with the 24-70 and the 70-200, is make it smaller, a lot more compact. I'm hoping that we can get a 16-35 that's somewhere around the size of the 35mm f1.4 G Master, maybe a little bigger. The front element's a little bigger because, you know, we're at 16, a lot lighter than the version 1. And if they're not going to make it smaller, right? If they're not going to make it significantly smaller, let's see some innovation. Let's see a 16-35, you know, 2.0, whatever it is. The version 2 of that 16-35 really needs to come out because we have been waiting for it. The 16-35 and I think the 24-70 are probably the two oldest G Masters in the Sony lineup. And so it is long in the tooth. I think I saw someone today say that they were thinking about buying the original 16-35. And I just think that would be a mistake because this 16-35 version 2 needs to come out. And so those are my lenses. Those are my dream lenses. 5 lenses that I hope that Sony comes out with really very soon. And just to recap, a new 50mm 1.8, affordable, $300 to $350. A 35mm T 1.2 Cine lens that's made by Sony for Sony cameras. A 20 to 40mm G lens that's made by Sony for Sony cameras. An 85mm 1.2 G Master to replace my beloved 85mm. And then the magnum opus, a 16-35 G Master lens version 2. What do you guys think? What lenses do you guys think that Sony needs to make? And outside of the regular lenses, what's a zoom lens that you guys think that Sony should make that would be really interesting? Anyway, let's talk about it down below. I'm Jamil. This is a boy named Jamil. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.